like to welcome everyone to the 2019 Candidates Forum for Town Council. My name is Ketty Marks. The forum is being sponsored by the Citizens Education Committee of TALK, which is a nonprofit organization based in Glastonbury that encourages active citizen participation in government. I'd like to tell you now that we are dealing with local issues tonight, so I hope that your questions have addressed those. And I'd like now to introduce the moderators. We have Adam Tierra, who is Applied Assistant Professor in the School of Communication at the University of Hartford, and Julie Zakowski, who is waiting, right, the Assistant Professor in Residence in the Department of Journalism at the University of Connecticut. And we thank them for doing this for us tonight. And on the table to my left, we have Kim McLean, who's going to be doing the time for us, being assisted by Bruce Bowman. Sorry. Okay. The forum will begin. You can hear it? Okay. The forum will begin with the candidates' opening remarks, and these will be followed by a question and answer period. The candidates will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question, and if there is a follow-up question, 30 seconds. After the closing statements, the candidates will take questions from the audience. I believe you've already submitted those questions. Okay. Please, I hope that if you had a question for the candidate or candidates, that you did not address those questions to a particular candidate. And I think that's it for that. There will be a short break between the rounds. There are 2 rounds. And there'll be, I don't know, like a 5-minute or maybe a little more break between, so you can help yourself to items at the back. Anyone who needs information about the bathrooms, there's one to the left and one to the right on this floor. And just before the forum begins, please, as in every theater and movie house and every place else, turn off your cell phones and please refrain from clapping until the forum concludes. Okay, thank you. One table.
All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for coming. This only works if we have candidates and a public, too, so we appreciate all of your time. We're about to get started. Just so you quickly know, as our role here as moderator, we're just getting this moving along. You know, we'll, of course, if there's something that needs a follow-up, we can ask that, but we're really hands-off here. There is one thing that we are going to have to do, and Julie and I both, teach, so usually we have to get students to expand on their answer. For you, unfortunately, we're going to have to make sure that it stays within that time budget. So we will, if you start to go over the time, have to let you wrap it up, and that's really a big part of our role today. And so let's get this started, and Julie is going to have the first question to ask here. I'm sorry, Pat, we're not doing questions. I apologize, it's me. All right, got the jitters out already. So we're going to first do introductory statements. We're going down the line to make this easy to start off with. So we'll start with you, Mr. Beckett. I have to just ask for a favor over here. Neither one of us can see your names from this angle here. So, Mr. Beckett, after you do your 1-minute statement and you pass it on, from then on, can everybody else just say your name, do your statement as we get all the way across. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Chip Beckett. I'm a veterinarian with an office about a mile down the street in a part-time farm. I've served on the town council since 2005. I've lived here about 50 years, and Glastonbury certainly changed a lot in that time. But I like serving on the town council to help solve some of our most challenging public policy issues. I think it's important for me to use my abilities to try and help my family, my friends, and my neighbors make life better here than it otherwise would be. I was never fortunate enough to serve in the military, but I view being able to be on town council my public service and my way to help give back to society for all the good fortune I've had in the past. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Deb Carroll, and I'm running for my second term on Glastonbury Town Council. I currently serve as the majority leader, and I am also a member of the Policy and Ordinance Committee. The last 2 years have been genuinely interesting. It is a steep learning curve, especially for someone with a humanities background, to get a handle on the language and intricacies of the budget process in particular. But I found it a genuinely compelling challenge. I'm eager to continue to serve my neighbors and friends, and to continue to support the growth and preservation of our town, and to plan for Glastonbury's future. Above all else, this is a job that requires patience, civility, and the ability to see beyond your own individual preferences or opinions. We're elected to represent all of Glastonbury, not just those who voted for us, and not just those whose demographics match our own. I've made it a priority to make thoughtful decisions, and should I be elected to a second term, I would continue to do so.
Hi, I'm Kurt Cavanaugh. I'm running for what I believe is my 12th or 14th term. I really don't remember. Family moved to Glastonbury in 1965. We have a history of public service. My brother and I are both retired from the Hartford Fire Department. My nephew is currently a police officer. And as Chip said, the town has changed quite a bit since the 1960s. And I consider myself to be fortunate to stand on the shoulders of those that have built this town, not only the elected officials, but the business leaders, the Monacos, the Louis, the Customs, and Kalanas, the farms, the tobacco fields that were no longer here, but they're rather a large component of Glastonbury when we moved here. So I am grateful to be here tonight. I'm looking forward to your questions, and enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm Tom Gallotta. I've lived here in town just about 50 years. I came here remembering that Grey Ledge Turkey Farm used to have a great place where Gino's was. For those of you who remember that. You probably also remember that you could get a quart of milk for 25 cents behind the old Texaco station, which we oftentimes did. I served on the council and the Board of Education back in the 80s and 90s. Took 20 years off, and then came back. And I think I'm going on my 5th term now. I'm currently the council chair. I remember the past. We need to go into the future, but we don't forget the past. And I think most of us are living in this community because of the importance of the way this town has developed, particularly in terms of wanting to keep its farms and its historical buildings going into the future. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mary LaChance. Compared to everybody else, I moved to town relatively recently. Moved here over a decade ago when my older son was about to go into kindergarten. I have 2 boys who are in 9th and 11th grade now. I work at Travelers Insurance in IT, and I manage budgets and work for IT. I also, along with Wendy Smith, about 5 years ago, I think actually 5 years ago, we started the Glastonbury Robotics and Engineering Club, which is a group that promotes science and technology and kids working together. And it has grown immensely over the years, from just 2 teams when I started to now 27 teams in town for FLO, and about 200 kids in each of the programs now. So why did I join town council 2 years ago? I really believe in giving back to the community, not only through volunteering and creating.
You're our first victim.
Oh, that goes by really fast. I will pass it on. I will talk to her later.
Good evening. My name is Phil Markuska. I moved to town a little over 2.5 years ago with my fiance and I when we first bought our house. When I moved to town, I didn't have any connections, but I had a desire to get involved. So I contacted some folks that I thought would point me in the right direction, and they did. And since then, I've become involved. I am the Glastonbury rep on the Cox Cable Advisory Council. From that organization, I'm on the statewide Video Advisory Council, and I also serve on the Commission on Aging. Apart from that, I also serve on the board of directors of Kids Chance of Connecticut, which is an organization that provides scholarships to students whose parents or guardians were severely or seriously injured in a workplace accident. Professionally, I'm an attorney, and I want to thank Talk for having us tonight. I look forward to having a constructive dialogue and conversation with everybody here. Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Jake McChesney. I have the fortune of serving the people of Glastonbury on Town Council currently. My wife and I moved here, I was just thinking tonight, I guess it's almost a half a decade ago now. We moved here probably for the same reason many in town did, that it was a town that had an excellent education system, wonderful open spaces, green spaces, nice small town feel that had the traffic you would expect in a nice small town feel sometimes. And all in all, it was just a wonderful place to call home. And when we moved here, shortly after moving here, I left my position as a prosecutor at the time. I moved into private practice, and so I was looking for ways to give back. So I initially ran for town council 2 years ago. I did not win a seat then, so I joined town plan and zoning, where I served for about a year. And then when our state rep Jill Berry went to the Capitol, I joined council.
Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I'm Larry Nyland, I'm Vice Chairman of the Glastonbury Town Council. I've been on Town Council for 2 years. I'm an IT specialist with the town of West Hartford, and I've got 29 and a half years of municipal experience. Before I came to the council, I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission. 2 years ago, I started out as majority leader, and when Jill was elected to state rep, I moved up to majority leader. Over the past couple of years, I've worked to deliver responsible budgets, to maintain a strong educational system, and provide services that benefit all of our residents. It's been my mission over the past 2 years to listen to everyone and not let ideology get in the way of making a proper decision for Glastonbury. From our youngest to our oldest, to those on the left, to those on the right, and everyone in between, we are all one Glastonbury. We might not agree on everything, but we do our best to find common ground. So thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is George Norman. I'm currently serving my first term on the town council. I moved to town with my wife and children back in 2002. I was stationed at the submarine base. My wife was getting her master's in music education at the University of Connecticut. And I have not lived here, truth in advertising, the entire time. Physically lived here. This has been my residency, or my residence. When I retired from the Navy, I did 27 years in the Navy. I was a captain of 2 submarines, a number of other assignments, including budget officer on the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. So when I retired from the Navy 5 years ago and could live anywhere, we chose to come back here, again, for a lot of the reasons others have mentioned, Jake and others, and probably many of you, the schools, the restaurants, this community, and the rural feel. And I want to keep that balance for generations to come to pay back for those who brought us here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Whit Osgood. I've been on the council since 2001. I've been a resident of Glastonbury for over 30 years now. Had 3 children, raised them in town. They all went through the public school system. I've been very pleased to serve the town on the council. I would say that my focus has been on keeping our taxes as low as possible while maintaining the excellent quality of our town services and our educational system. I'm on the Great Ponds Stewardship Committee, the Constable Land Trust, the Great Meadows Conservation Trust, and the prior member of the Town Planning and Zoning Committee. So look forward to answering your questions tonight, and hope we have a good discussion. Thank you.
Hi everybody, Matt Sonnig. I'm the newbie on the Democratic slate this year. First, I'd like to thank Talk for hosting this event. Thank all of you for coming out, and thank our moderators as well for their help. I moved to town, my wife and I moved to town 5 years ago. We love it here. We live in East Glastonbury with our corgi, Brendan, and it's a great town to live in. Currently serve as an alternate on the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Before that, I previously served on the Ethics Commission and on the Public Buildings Commission. And I also wear the hat of being the chair of the Glastonbury Democratic Town Committee. So though I've only been here for 5 years, certainly very involved in the community, and I want to give back. And because I love Glastonbury, that's why I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring this year for Town Council. I love it here, and I would love the opportunity to serve, and looking forward to a great conversation tonight. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lillian Tansky, and I'm currently finishing up my first term on the Board of Education in town here. Prior to that, I served on the Town Planning and Zoning Commission and on the Wells Street Library Board. I am a mom of 4 school-age kids here in Glastonbury. They all attend our Glastonbury schools. And I'm also a very active community volunteer in the schools, in my church, as a Lion, and also on the Newcomer and Neighbors Club Board. But my reason for being here tonight is not because of my experiences in Glastonbury. It's because of where I come from. I come from a very working class suburb outside Detroit, and I was raised in a community where the political environment was not responsive to our needs, to the needs of families like mine, whether that be about race or income or working laws. And I learned from my mother and grandmother who raised me that you need to be involved and you need to be the change you want to see for your communities. That's why I'm here.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we're about to get started. Just so we can explain it a little bit more, for this first round here, Julie is going to pull the candidate from the Republican hat. She's then going to pull the question, ask the question. I will then pull the hat from the name from the Democrat hat. We're going to do that for the first round, and then in round 2, we'll switch it up. It'll be the reverse. We'll start with the Democrat question, Republican. All right, let's get started.
Okay, the first question goes to Lillian Tansky. And it is, how can Glastonbury upgrade its transportation system so all residents can easily access town services and businesses?
That is a wonderful and a very large question. I think at this point, where I would come from as a new member of town council, and that would be about gathering information. One of those would be about cost for our current senior shuttle services, to look at possibly expanding a service like that and what it would cost and the plausibility of doing something like that. I think we would also need to look at the ridership of our buses, because we don't want people only to access things that are in town, but to be able to access the community of Greater Hartford as well, and accessibility to that would be very important. But I think it would really begin with data. Begin with knowing the ridership, which I don't know off the top of my head. Speaking to the state to see if you could have additional spots along the routes, which would make it easier for people who live in town to move around and to get places. But also, our businesses rely on a lot of employees who use the public transportation system. And I think that would be a huge economic boon to our town as well, if we could access a labor pool of people who need better public transportation. So I think it's a win-win. It's something that we should look at, and I would love to look at and support. It is all about gathering the data points, I think. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pull from the Democratic hat now, though I apologize whoever I pull, because apparently we were supposed to pull them at both at the same time. So I'm sorry for the first one. And also, for candidates, when you speak, if you don't mind standing up, because it's hard for those in the back to be able to see you. All right, so sorry. Let's see who this first person is that's mad at me for the night. Larry Nyland. Are you too mad at me? Okay. All right.
All good. Thank you. We've got a giant town. It's not easy to get from one end of the town to the other. It takes, where my wife and I live, we live way out on the other end of Hebron Avenue towards the Hebron line. We come down this end of town, and it can take us 25 minutes, and we're still in the same town. So there are some big challenges there. And we have ride services for our seniors there, and that is a great thing. As we get closer to the center of town, I think I've worked on the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development. We've worked towards complete streets, where we encourage more biking and more walking on all of our streets. We've done that over the past 2 years, and when I was on planning and zoning, I was also on the subcommittee for POCD. So I think those are 2 really big things that will help. We are doing a lot of work with sidewalks. We're completing the connection from South Glastonbury to Main Street. That was in this year's CIP project. That's going to make that piece of town more walkable, all the way down to Silene. I guess I think we'll have sidewalks there from the Route 17 intersection. So there are things that we can do. It's a big town. It's tough to cover everything, but we're doing what we can, and that's about what I got for you. Thank you.
All right. Tom Galata,
Philip Marcuska.
and the question will be, Glastonbury has some mixed income housing. What is your position of bringing in additional mixed income housing?
I think this works. Yeah, it's working. All right. Oh, the Republican goes first next. So.
No, I'm sorry, I screwed it all up. It's you, yeah. We just call both names. The Republican that was called.
You know what? Actually, I can be a switch hitter because back in the 80s and early 90s, I was actually elected as Republican. So
Thank you.
You would have been right either way. But now in this new millennium, I'm a Democrat, proudly so. The issue of affordable housing. A couple things that we need to recognize. And that is that this is really not so much a local issue as it is a regional and a national issue. When I was on the council a lifetime ago, that council came up with creating an incentive plan for developers to put affordable housing into their projects. I remember Georgetown condominiums. I don't know if any of you live in Georgetown or South Mill for that matter. Both went underneath that program. So for increased density, they were given the expectation that they would put affordable housing units in. Sadly, those affordable housing units never sold. And after 2 years, the developers were released and they sold those houses at market rate. Now, when South Mill came in several months ago to put in their final stage, their moderate housing, using the regional data, was $330,000. So if you're looking at the private sector for doing this, you're not looking in the right place, friends. Okay? You're looking at a regional, national approach. Why? Because I only have a few seconds left. Why? Because the cost of land and the cost of development does not make it affordable for folks who are in the working poor.
Thank you. Mr. Marcusa?
It's actually ironic because I went to a meeting a few months ago with a few of our, I think Chip was there and George Norman were there as well, and I believe it was put on with Talking, one of the other organizations in town, and they actually made it very clear because a lot of times people think mixed income or households, those are based on just race or different demographics, but it's actually across the board, so I think it's a great idea. It's for the elderly, it's people from, like Tom was saying, just lower middle class. So one, I think it's very important to make sure we break from any stereotypes, assuming that it's only certain people are from one ethnicity, one race. And if you look at the communities that they were showing and the statistics, it actually bettered the community. There was a more cohesive feeling, a cultural blending. Neighbors were able to actually take care of each other. They gave an example of one family where an elderly gal would actually babysit a family's kids, and then she would actually go to sporting events with the family and vice versa. So that's just an example of how it actually would bring everyone together in this town. My work on the Commission on Aging, I think, would also kind of coincides perfectly with that, because we want to make sure that every single age group and race, ethnicity are all connected. We want to know what's important to them in this community while not just ignoring one group because they might not be the most vocal or have the most powerful position in town. I think it's very prudent that we make sure that we have a feeling and tap into the voice of every single member in our community. So I think that this would be something that should definitely be explored. I think it would be a good idea, and it could only add to the value and the culture of Glastonbury going forward as the demographics continue to change.
Thank you.
And Jake McChesney.
What is your position on open space acquisition by the town of Glastonbury?
Yes. Do I have any time left? I voted for every open space acquisition since the ordinance was put in place in 1988. I think it sat dormant for a couple of years, and then we started to move really aggressively to acquire as much land as we could. Make it so that there are less homes being built, more open space for the community. And one of my pet peeves is that if we buy the land, we have to allow citizens to access that land. You can't just buy it and leave it dormant. Your tax dollars are paying for these purchases. You should be able to enjoy that land, walk that land, and get the value out of what we're investing in all the open space. We're fortunate that we've come to we think a deal with the Metropolitan District and their pension fund with the land on Kinney Street. That would be our biggest acquisition, I believe, in the number of years that we've been acquired. I think we're over 1,200 acres that we've acquired. So it's a no-brainer for me. I enjoyed supporting each one, and I expect to support them in the future as well.
Thank you. Mr. McChesney?
Hi. I think this is going to be an easy one, so I'm going to quickly say something that, you're right, Mary, the time goes very quickly at the beginning. One thing I forgot to mention is I am the proud father of a new 7-month-old, and I will say I'm probably biased, but I think he's the cutest 7-month-old in Glastonbury. But on the topic of open spaces, I got to say this is probably an area where Kurt and I very much agree. As I mentioned in my opening statement, one of the best things about Glastonbury is our open spaces, our green spaces, either that we have for public use or just preserved in general. It helps us preserve the character of the town, and it also has the added benefit of preventing overdevelopment of the area. If you look at something like the MDC purchase that is happening right now, that's a very large area that, if you think about what would go there, a large number of residential houses, and what would come with a large number of residential houses, a lot of children, and a lot of children means we're going to have to build another school. So there's a very real advantage to purchasing select parcels throughout town. I think it's been a very successful program throughout our time as a town, and it's helped us keep our costs down and preserve the charm of Glastonbury. So very much in favor of open space purchases.
Thank you. Mary LaChance?
With Osgood.
And the question is, Glastonbury has taken steps to protect its air, land, and water. Does it need to do more to protect the environment? If so, what steps should be taken?
So I love this question. As I said at the beginning, I have a son who is a junior in high school, and over the summer, he actually participated in the Yukon Conservation Ambassador Program, where he learned how to test water, test soil, and make sure that we're making good use of our public land and making sure that we're not contaminating things along the way. So I think that we've done a lot already within town. I think the plastic bag ordinance really did help with reducing the amount of plastic that will end up in our streams and eventually in our own bodies. But there's a whole lot more that we can do. We have the river that goes right along a lot of our town, which is a great resource within town as long as we keep it clean. So I think looking at how we are using the public lands within town and looking at kind of how we can preserve that. I think there's a lot more that we can do. Reaching out to people who are experts within the field, I think, is an important thing to do. But I think one of the best things about Glastonbury when we're talking about the open spaces, that helps with keeping the air clean, as well as a lot of the other things that both Kurt and Jake talked about. But that only happens if people stay involved. I know that TALK members have done a lot within town, and I think we can continue to do more. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much easier when you have 2 minutes to come up with your answer. Glastonbury's done a lot for the environment since I've been on the council.
The mic is right.
Turn it on.
There we go. How's that? A little better.
We've installed significant amount of solar collectors, solar energy. We have worked with electric charging stations, natural gas charging stations. We have comprehensive planning requirements for new developments, and as mentioned previously, we've done a lot for land acquisition, which also helps the environment substantially. What can be done in the future? I'll just name a couple of things. We've talked about the possibility of purchasing streetlights in town, where that makes sense financially, and potentially converting to LEDs. That would be one thing. And again, public transportation is another. We just heard recently that potentially the express bus route down to South Glastonbury may be canceled. We're working to assure that that is continued. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Chip Beckett.
And Matt Sonia.
How do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our town?
You all have to come to my house and tell me what you think every time we have a discussion. I think we try to involve residents reasonably effectively through the public hearing process. And I don't mean the final public hearing, but all the introductory hearings from all the different boards and commissions that go on beforehand. And I think people don't realize how many emails, not letters, handwritten letters and notes, but we do get a lot of emails from people about what they think, and that we read all those. So I think that we do try to get a good sense. I know we have lamented that we can pass a $160 million budget and have nobody in the audience, and I think that's a little bit sad. So I hope that people stay engaged and look at what the issues are as they come up, because I think it's always most frustrating when people say, how did that happen? And we've been talking about it for a year and a half, and we've had 5 public hearings. Nobody said anything, and then you read in the Citizen 5 letters about how this was slipped in the dark of night. So I do encourage everybody to pay attention, look at the Citizen, check with any of the council members. I think, as it was said, all 9 of us represent everybody in town, not by party, not by geographic district. So feel free to let us know what you're thinking and what your issues are. Thanks.
Thank you.
So this is a great question. As chair of the Glastonbury Democratic Town Committee, I've been really proud that we've expanded our membership to include a much more diverse group of people. And I think that's brought with it a whole range of different perspectives that have made the organization better. So certainly looking to increase the diversity of voices that we hear from, I think is huge. But I think we can't just wait for the voices to come to us with suggestions or with concerns. I think we've got to go out into the community and be advocates for what we're trying to do, but also with open ears so that we hear what the needs are of people. Some people may not know that there are people here like us, if we're on council, that are available to hear their concerns. They may just not know it, or they may be too busy with their lives. I think we've got to do a better job of active community engagement, not just with our town's residents, but also with our local businesses as well. Because I think, I was talking to a business owner today in town, and just hearing what the kinds of issues he's facing in his business. I think having those conversations and going out into the public is really important for getting that diverse perspective from folks.
Thank you. Deborah Carroll.
George Norman.
What is your position on creating more developments in Glastonbury that combine residential living and commercial use?
So I'll freely admit that I do have notes, which if you see me staring down, that's why I have half the time I don't remember my ATM PIN code. So as far as developments that combine business and residential, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a place where we can potentially look at finding diversification in housing, whether it be affordable housing or senior housing or any of the other demographics that we're struggling to serve in town. That said, I know that folks have talked about bringing in mixed-use developments into the center of town as 4-story buildings. And that the council has pushed back against. I have pushed back against. I think that that's something we really need to think carefully about as far as the look and feel of our town. No one living in the residential areas that do exist in the center of town want a 4-story building going up behind their house. I know that that's happening. And I think as long as we are thoughtful about the way we combine things, I think it's also a great opportunity for us to make the town more walkable. If we've got folks living in areas that do have business development, then they have an opportunity to live in a part of town that they can easily access on foot. So I think with all of our development, as long as we're keeping in mind the character of the town and ensuring that we are looking to make everything as livable for as many people in town as we can so that people can stay here, whether they've got kids in the schools or not, then we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
I was hoping you were going to give your ATM pin. Yeah, I think you did cover a lot of the main points here, and so I'm just going to maybe emphasize a couple things, frankly, with the luxury of sitting for a little bit. You know, we had 2 questions earlier about transportation and environment, right? And so a mixed use, both of those can help address those problems or those issues. If we can have, a mixed use where we have business and residential in the town center. And I think whether that requires 4 stories or not is probably still something first to be determined and see if that is true, and then if that were true, how we would feel about that. Would be a separate discussion. But I think, so I would emphasize those are things that are positive. The other comment I would just make when we always talk about mill rate, and again, to the extent that we can get some level of business development, then that helps us from a mill rate perspective because we don't use our most important but expensive service, which is education. So I think, I would certainly favor of any mixed-use development, and as we think again about business development and the tax, there are kind of 2 choices. One, do nothing. That means all tax rate is us. Any increase we're going to pay as residents. 2, we go horizontal. That eats into open space, which I think you see we all like, as well as the environmental and the character of town. Or you look at, can you go up half a story or whatever that might mean, to me is the better option as we think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. That marks the end of our first round of questions. There'll be a short break and we'll continue with the second round.
All right, so now that I've royally confused everybody to start, we're going to go over the game plan now for the second half here. So we're about to do the second round. It's going to be the same thing. I'll start off with a name from the Democratic side, usually from the Republican. We'll ask the question, and we'll go through. After that, we'll have a brief time. I know some of you filled out audience questions. We won't have time to go through them all. We'll have time to go over some brief audience member questions. I'll explain how that's going to work when we get to that part. And then we'll do closing round, and then we have a nice little bonus question for you all. You didn't have to study for it, but we'll have some fun to end this all right? So let's get started here. Jake McChesney.
I'm Philip Markuska.
And the question is, there are pros and cons to regionalizing the Hartford school system. What is your position on the issue?
Well, I'm not in favor of regionalizing the Glastonbury school system. So I'm going to go back to what I said in my opening statement. One of the biggest draws for Glastonbury is our education system. And I think that there may be areas to regionalize and have cost-saving measures throughout town, but I don't think that our school system is where we should be regionalizing. I don't think that it is the right thing for Glastonbury, and I think that As far as our students go, we take pride in our education system, and it's not something that we should be mixing with other communities. We should retain control over how our kids are taught and what they're taught, and I think that that is the right thing for town.
Thank you.
I agree with Jake on that. He also made a point that there are numerous services in town and departments that are regionalized. I think we all know that. Glastonbury school system is, for all intents and purposes, the pride and jewel of this town. If you look at the statistics that were in the Citizen last week, they're astonishing. The amount of kids who are successful, the SAT scores, the test scores are off the charts. And that speaks volumes for the parents, grandparents in this room for how you've done in raising this community and the students there. There are plenty of opportunities for kids to come into school. I know the special needs kids, they do come in for the Links program. I'm sure, kids are bused in as well. So there are opportunities. The sports teams are integrated. If certain towns don't have an athletic sports team, kids can come on and play, granted now for a fee, but I agree with Jake. I think it's part of the property values in this town, and people, the draw to move here for young families is because of the school system. I'll be honest, that's one of the main reasons that I moved to town. Me and my fiance want to have a family, I want to stay here, and the school system is really, second to none in my opinion. So I want to keep it that way, and I think regionalization would have a pretty drastic effect on that. And I don't think it would be beneficial. I think it would be dramatically a negative impact.
Thank you. For Kirk Kavanaugh.
Mary LaChance.
Glastonbury residents have written letters to the Citizen, both in favor and against building an aquatic center in Glastonbury. What is your position on this issue?
Well, we have finally got to a point where our bonding obligations are starting to decrease. And what was the estimate price for what we looked at? So 13 to 15, 20 million, and that's without the land, it's without parking. There's a lot of other things that we have to look at before anything is sent to the public, if it is. I don't think now is the time for an aquatic center in Glastonbury. I think we have other issues that we have to be dealing with. I voted for a report, a study, to see how much it would cost and what the implications are. And I'll be honest with you, I think if you vote to send something off to a committee or a consultant, it kind of gives the public the impression that you're moving forward with that. I don't think I'm going to do that anymore, because I don't want to lead people in the wrong direction. And so, at least as for myself, if there's something that I think is too inexpensive, the town can't afford, then I'm not going to ask for a study anymore, because it just leads to, I think it frightens people to say no. I mean, at some point, you have to, we're here to make decisions on your behalf. There are people that come in and say they want it, there are people that come in and say they don't want it. And so we have to use our own knowledge and experience to see, where are you going to fall out on this issue. But I'm afraid that when you say you're going to conduct a study, that it leaves the impression that, okay, next step is, and then the final step is a referendum, and I'm going to be more reluctant to do that in the future.
So I think let's go back and think about how we got to where we are right now with the pool. Grange Pool is nearing the end of its life, and when we were looking at that, we had a study that was done that looked at different places within town where we could build a pool. And I believe those estimates were in the $4 million-ish range. And I think it was a great idea by George Norman down there to think about should we consider something that could be year-round and get an idea of how much would that actually cost. Because when you talk about the pools that we have now that are outdoor, you really only get a couple, 3 months use out of them. So I think it was a good idea to go and look at how much it might cost. One thing that I would like to see if we're going to go down the road of having a pool within, an enclosed pool within town, is making sure that we also have private donations that go into it. So when we think about the library expansion that we had, the Friends of the Library and I'm missing the Second Centuries Fund, put out a percentage-wise a large amount of the money that went into it. That really shows that we have strong community support behind it, and lowers the cost of that project as well. So if we were to go forward with the pool, I would really like to see a lot more private donations to offset the cost of that. The price tag that we've seen so far seems unaffordable for the town. That doesn't mean that we can't have an indoor public pool, but we might need to look at what is the scope of that. I also agree with Kurt on that. If you look at how much funding do we have in the capital, it is a smaller number.
Thank you. Deborah Carroll.
Chip Beckett.
What steps would you take to improve safety for our pedestrians along Main Street and other high-traffic roads?
Oh, I like this question. So, improving safety. I would say that some of the measures that we've taken in the last year in putting the flashing pedestrian signs, which are fairly unignorable for drivers, I think that goes along fairly. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Makes a big difference. I think that we need to continue looking at, as we increase pedestrian traffic by increasing development in town, along with that, we need to make sure that we are expanding pedestrian safety at the same time. So whether that means we're doing a traffic study or, I guess, a pedestrian study to see where folks are crossing, that's another issue. I would say from experience, particularly since the installation of the 2 roundabouts in town, folks are not always crossing at the crosswalks. And I know that it's very tempting there and on parts of Main Street to cross where it's most convenient. But those are also points where you're decidedly more likely to get hit by a car. So whether it is also public information, encouraging people to actually remember to use the crosswalks and to better mark those crosswalks. I also think raised crosswalks, because you're going to be forced to slow down. I lived in a very nice suburb of New Jersey 2 lives ago, and lovely affluent town, lots of cars, and in the space of 1 year, 6 pedestrians were hit and 2 were killed in our town because folks would blast through the center of town without looking. And there was a lot of work on the part of the town to educate both pedestrians and drivers to be more aware. So we just need to make sure we're doing both of those in conjunction with development.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think pedestrian safety is something that has been ignored in this country for the last 8 years, and I think it's hard to turn around the Titanic. But the last 15 years, we've pushed very hard on sidewalks. And I think that they're absolutely essential. But I remember not that long before the sidewalk program started, there was people said, we're a rural town, we don't need any sidewalks in town. So that's how big of a shift it's been just in my adult life. I think environmentally, more people need to walk. For their health, more people need to walk. We need to make it safe for all users and all abilities, which means increased sidewalks, improved pedestrian crosswalks, and also traffic calming on the roads themselves. And there's a variety of things. I don't like the English humps and the raised crosswalks, but you see things in Ireland and other places where they have bump outs. They put planters and islands in the middle of the road, and nobody likes to drive 60 miles an hour with 6 inches on either side of their car because they're going to scratch the paint. And so they don't care about the pedestrians, but they care about scratching their paint. So if we make narrow enough places, and Susan will remember, she's commenting, but we bought those signs, we bought I think 4 of those sandwich board signs to put on the crosswalks. And it's amazing, they probably drop traffic 10 miles an hour going on those crosswalks. So it's sometimes something very simple and small, but people are worried about damaging their car, and we need to do that so that they are safe for pedestrians. Thanks.
Thank you. George Norman.
Matt Sogin.
If you received a non-refundable $1 million grant for our town, how would you use the grant money to help Glastonbury?
Okay, I did not expect this question. That's a good question. So, I don't know if I have an answer off the top of my head. I think, the first thing I'll say this is, right, so the quick answer would be, okay, we can build something or whatever that is. And I think the issue with that is everything has an operating cost. That's something you always have to remember. And operating costs are the gift that keep on giving. And we can't ever lose sight of that. So this may be an unexciting answer, but perhaps the best thing to do was let's make a down payment on our debt, on our bond payment. That frees up cash flow every year, and then we have an option to either take a mill rate reduction from that, or perhaps we then, that also gives us room for future capital improvement that we can send to referendum and vote on and think about. So I guess my quick answer, if I said I had $1 million, the first thing I would do, let's pay off some debt, frees up capital cash flow, gives us options for either mill rate or other choices.
So are we getting $1 million grant? Is that so not a really sexy answer, similar to George's. I think first, we need to, as a town, just be as efficient as possible with our resources. So I know there's been some talk about studies, but I would study ways that the town could be more efficient in the way that it provides services to people. Because I think we just need to be as lean and mean as possible. The state financial situation is still a question for us. And we need to be able to absorb whatever comes down the pipe from that. So I think I would use some of that money to do an audit of town operations to see what ways we can be more efficient. The rest of the money, I agree with George, I would put towards debt service, because I think we do need to just, again, free up as much space in our budget as possible. And if that means a reduction in the mill rate, that's awesome. But either way, I think we need to be in a position that we're nimble and able to absorb whatever's coming down the pike and be flexible.
Thank you. Larry Nyland.
Whit Osgood.
How would you prioritize the use of Glastonbury's capital improvement monies?
Thank you. Capital improvement money, over the past couple of years, we've had a number of different discussions. We have the Board of Ed, who takes up 2/3 of our budget overall. We have town operations. The town is responsible for a number of buildings. We have so many different, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think our capital improvement budget was $7 million this past year. There are a lot of projects. There are a lot of things that need to be done. We have to take care of our roads. You can't drive on our roads. You're not going to get around. You've got problems with your car. We've got to take care of our roads. We've got to take care of our buildings. They need annual maintenance. We've got other projects that are coming down the road that either the Board of Education has asked for or the town has asked for. The Board of Education has prioritized the field house as one of their top priorities coming up. So to pick one, I can't. At the end of the year, or when we're doing the budget, we're able to put together a bunch of our priorities and work with the town manager, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Ed, and say, okay, here's what we have to spend. We want to keep that number as lean as possible. Here's what we think we can do this year. What is the most important? And year to year, that changes. We've got roofs on barns that the town owns in South Glastonbury. We have to take care of those. So to take any one particular position, it's tough to do, but know that there are so many. We do as much as we can with the limited funds that we have and try and still keep our mill rate down.
So we actually have a very effective capital improvement program in town. I don't know if people are aware of that. But over the years, we've developed a system where each year we evaluate the priorities that the town manager and the Board of Education has, and we decide on what can be funded this year to keep our taxes in a reasonable realm. Basically, first off, maintain what you have. We have a large capital base with our buildings, our roads. We use our capital improvement program to maintain that. You notice I brought my nose. I can't see quite this far down to read. We should make, and we do make investments in areas that increase efficiency, improve town operations, Board of Ed operations. As Larry alluded to, we have to prioritize our projects. We have to look at what's nice to have versus what we need to have. Larry mentioned the field house, $2 million field house. Is that nice to have or need to have? There's a question there, in my mind at least. I think in some cases also we need to, rather than fund things out of the capital improvement program, which is the annual program of the town, large projects we should consider sending to referendum if indeed they make sense. Field house might be an example of that. See what the voters think of that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question goes to Lillian Tansey.
Tom Galante.
Glastonbury has a problem with uranium in its wells. We know it costs money to address the problem. Who or what entities should be responsible for incurring that cost?
Absolutely. Uranium is clearly of great concern for the safety of our residents, for the health of our environment, for our property values going forward. It's something that's going to have to be addressed. In terms of who should be fronting the cost, I think the question we need to know the answer to first is, what is the cost? What is the scope of this problem in our town? We haven't had, much of our town still hasn't been tested. Of what has been tested, the wells, half of our town is well, half is city water. About 33% of those have had unacceptable levels of uranium. So we clearly have a real problem, but I think we need to have more comprehensive testing on the part of residents. We need to give it another go on the town side to get more people to test, I think. And then the plan that the town council and the state are currently following, which is working with environmental experts and mitigation experts, the grant money from the state, which should be funding the study that is needed to figure out the scope of the problem in town and the possible solutions, is right on. It's the perfect course for this time. When it comes down to it, the question of mitigation versus hookups to public water is going to be intensely personal, and I think will be very different depending on where people live in town. Some places will be prohibitively expensive, probably to connect to public water, and some places may be relatively easy, especially, or easier. I would look at as the sewer, the main sewer program is set to be replacing some of its mains coming up, whether there's possible savings there. If you're already digging it up, maybe there are places you could run water at the time too. But it's a huge question right now, so the state, the town, and residents are going to have to work together to meet this really immediate need.
Thank you.
All right. I actually thought that I might get this question. I have written about it in The Citizen along with Chip Beckett, as you well know. I've spoken about it publicly. So let's first recognize that the town is not really in the driver's seat in this issue. It is the MDC and the Manchester Water Company that are in the driver's seat on this issue. I agree that we need to determine what the extent of the problem is. There is a ridge of granite that runs diagonally through this town. That is where the problem is occurring. It would be nice if it only involved one water company, the MDC. It doesn't. It involves two water companies in very different financial situations and with very different rules. Once we have some sense of what the extent of the problem is, we then need to recognize that you could potentially be opening a Pandora's box by just saying, let's extend water. So the next step is to get together with the local Department of Public Health and with TPMZ and make sure that whatever decisions the council takes, it isn't opening up the potential for land development on properties that should never, ever be developed. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, you now begin to start coming up with what's your approach. Is this like the bad concrete, and you're looking to the state of Connecticut for a bad concrete fund? Or is this a federal issue? Or is this a local town of Glastonbury taxpayer willing to pick up issue? Now, if it's that, it's called a referendum. And let me tell you, you better have your answers to be able to go to referendum, because you all will be deciding it. And I'm not sure that you all, meaning the citizens of this community, are prepared to want to pay a multi-million-dollar bill. So this is not easy. It needs to be walked carefully.
Thank you. That concludes the second round. We are now going to move on to audience questions. So this is the way that it's going to work. We have some audience questions here. I'm going to read the first one. After I read the first one, it's going to be raise your hand. I'm going to take one from the Democratic side and from the Republican side. I'm going to try to divvy it up so that everybody's able to answer that they'd like to, but one person's going to answer each one of these questions, then Julie's going to ask the next question and pull one Republican, one Democrat.
And if we ignored everything you said, what's the second first?
So you hope you don't get called first, but if you know, so again, after I ask the question, if you want to answer, please raise your hand. I'm going to try to divvy it up to get a Republican, a Democrat, and keep mixing it up, but we're going to try to get through this, and we're doing this by chance. That's what it's about. We're trying to do this by chance. And it's 2 minutes to answer, so 2 minutes for the timekeepers. All right, first question. What are you prepared to do about Glastonbury spending when the state allocation goes down? Someone, yes, that's awesome. Sorry.
Yeah. So I kind of answered this already, but I think it's just being as nimble as possible. Our state delegation does an awesome job of fighting for Glastonbury, but they can only do what they can do, and our state's financial situation is in question right now. And so what state aid is coming to town is in question. So I think just being as lean as possible and trying to find efficiencies anywhere that we can, and partnering with towns when it makes sense, not on education, but on other town services that can actually make sense, like the Links program. Things like that, I think. Just ways that we can be constantly looking to find some space to absorb whatever's coming down the pipe.
Thank you. Someone from the Republican side? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, certainly agree with a lot of what Matt said. I'll take it a little bit differently in this, and an approach, and something I have talked about a little bit, is that, I think we have to just fundamentally rethink a little bit of how we do our budget process. We have a very kind of bottoms-up process today where, organizations, be it Richard Board of Ed, whatever, capital improvement, those are kind of built up and come into us and say, okay, this is what I need to spend. That's fine. And that's a good approach. But we need to think about the affordability. And I think part of this, we need to start with a little bit of a top-down. What can we afford? What is the mill rate that we can afford? We kind of know what a green list, therefore, this is the amount we can spend. And I think you can create a little healthy tension in the system by doing it that way to get a fuller picture of, okay, if we don't spend 43 million on town operations, but we spend 42.5, here's what I lose, because 42.5 is what that top line that you can have. And I think it's important. The analogy I use is, I don't build my budget at home, determine what I'm going to spend, and go to my boss and say, I need to make X. I get a salary, and I have to live within that salary. So I think, I know that may be nuanced, but I think it's an important perspective to put into our system as we go through our budgeting process. And that'll make it clearer, again, here's the budget I had. People can come in and say, at that budget, I left the following things off the table. Okay, we can have a good conversation about those 10 items that we didn't fund and either put them in or not.
What one thing would you have the town stop doing or dramatically reduce? Stop doing or dramatically reduce. Did I stump you? Would you like me to move on?
Well, we didn't see anyone has the actual budget answer.
So my answer is not a budgetary answer. On the town side, as I've seen it as a resident and in service on the Youth and Family Commission, and when I was on planning and zoning, I have observed over the past 10 years that our town council has made significant savings in terms of the number of town employees we have and keeping services as lean as possible. In my last 4 years on the Board of Ed, I've also seen that. We do a good job of finding value with what we're given. But I do think there is something I would like to see the town stop doing, and it has to do with the function between the town council, the Board of Ed, and our Board of Finance. We need to all recognize, every elected official in town, that we all come from the same place, and that's we're all volunteering our time to do the best we can for our town, and that we all care about our town, and that's where everyone's priority lies. There's a lot of infighting and a lot of talk every budget season about how the Board of Ed doesn't care about taxpayers, or the Board of Finance doesn't care about kids, and that's false. We all care about each other, and I would like to see us stop having unproductive relationship and work together. And I'm hoping to bring my service on the Board of Ed to town council, my understanding of the budget process from the Board of Ed side and how it works, and really encourage a collegiality and mutual understanding. And I'm not saying we'll agree on the numbers, but collegiality and mutual understanding in what is probably the most important process for our town every year.
Thank you. Is there a Democrat that would like to go? Okay, yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Lillian's statement first, and I agree with her. And that's one of the things that we've really tried to do, especially over the past 2 years, is work with our Board of Finance, with our Board of Education, and make it a less hostile process between us. Now, again, we're not always going to agree on the numbers. The board's going to have their numbers, the Board of Finance is going to have their numbers, and we're going to have to, as the final elected official, as far as the budget's concerned, we're going to have our budget numbers too. But we've tried to work with people and say, okay, what can we do? Instead of, no, this is your number and you're done. That hasn't been how we've approached this. Now getting back to the question, if I had a magic wand, I get rid of fossil fuels. I've sat and talked to the town manager a number of times, and over the course of our 2 years, we have dramatically increased the number of solar panels that we have in our buildings. We've gone to natural gas cars, in a good piece of our fleet. We've gone to electric vehicles. So if I could do that, that'd be awesome. It's not quite that easy, but I mean, given the scope of the question, there you go.
Thank you. Our budgets and numbers keep coming up, so this looks like an appropriate one. What is the appropriate mill rate for the town, and is there a rate that is too high? And so we'll start now. We just, last time the Republican answered first, so Democrat was first and Republican next. Yes.
You can count all this time as a lifetime. Look, that's a ridiculous question. You've got a grand list. That grand list is re-examined every few years, and it determines whether or not your bottom line is going either up or down. You get a figure. And then from that figure, a group of mills is created. It's really not the mill rate, friends. It's what the mill is worth that matters. And then what really matters is your grand list tells you what you have to put a budget together. That tells you what you can spend. I spent 30 years running a nonprofit. I always told the board, live within operating, you'll always stay in business. It's real simple. This is not rocket science. Live within your grant list in terms of what it generates for taxes, you'll stay in business.
Well, I would agree with Tom that, it's not rocket science.
Turn on the mic there, please.
Sorry.
Repeat that first statement.
But here's the long and short challenge, and there's two. One, if your house doubles in value and your mill rate goes down by a third, are you really better off? Because you're still spending more dollars. So sometimes we talk about mill rates when it really doesn't mean very much, because it's only half the equation. And the other problem we've confronted in Connecticut is we have strong binding arbitration in a largely unionized workforce. Binding arbitration pretty much guarantees that state and education employees get 2.5% to 3% cost increases every year. That's not good or bad, that's just the facts of the way the contracts get settled. And we have a stagnant real estate value, which means that we have about 1% grand list growth, or a little bit less, trying to offset a 3% tax increase, or cost increase. The only way you can bridge that gap is for the mill rate to rise about the inflation rate, which it's done for the last 10 years, 1.5% to 2%. I think that's the fundamental challenge. If we really want the mill rate and the tax dollars to stay the same, then you have to eliminate all increases for healthcare, pensions, and salaries for all our employees. And so the question is that the map that the residents of Glastonbury want to go to?
This is a very basic question, but it's important because when we leave here, people will have more questions. Someone in the audience asks, if a Glastonbury resident wants to get in touch with a council member, clearly they would email the council member with the town email listed on the website. But they say it appears that many of you, I believe he or she wrote most of you, don't check those emails. So would you be willing to put a personal email address on the website so that people can get a response? You do already, you're saying? Do you want to answer? We have to go first.
Well, this is sort of like a disappointing question to answer. I don't want to tell you, yeah, you can have my email and be done with my open questions. So, yeah, I have people frequently email both my town and my personal email. I've also had people call my house, which is interesting because my husband and I have different last names, so I don't know how you found me. But I think all of us are comfortable having that information out there. I mean, we want constituents to let us know what's going on. I think some of us are better about checking our email than others, but we definitely try to respond to folks when they reach out to us, whether it's through email, showing up at public hearings, or whatever the case may be. Does this count as my question? Seriously, it does? All right, then I will also say, since this is my time, I'll also say that is the only way we know what's going on. I'm always disappointed when I find out that people have been kind of stewing about an issue and didn't reach out to us in one way or another. I do try to respond to things as quickly and comprehensively as I can. We often forward emails to each other if we're concerned that someone might not have checked their town email. And really, we're here to represent you. And so, I don't answer my home phone after like 7 p.m., but if you want to talk to one of my kids, they might also be able to give you an answer. They'll make something up. But we definitely can put that information out there and reach out. I think the most interesting thing about being on council for me truly is public comment. I have no idea what's on somebody's front burner until they come in and talk to us about it. And it's always really interesting.
Thank you. Would a Republican like to respond?
WOsgood@cox.net. And I stood up so I could actually address the question that was asked previously. When you talk about mill rate, everybody's correct. Obviously, it's a function of evaluations and your house values. The most important thing to look at is what are we doing to people's percent of income that the town is controlling versus what they're controlling. And if taxes are going up more than personal income, you've got a serious problem because you're moving decisions from the family to the town, and I don't think that's where it needs to be.
Thank you. And that concludes the questions from the audience. So we're now going to do our closing round here. We're going to start with Lillian Tansky here at the end. We're going to do reverse since we started with Chip to start, Chip Beckett. So Lillian, please go ahead. And then after you're done, please just pass the mic down. And we'll do 2 minutes down the reverse.
Not used to getting to be at the start of a line. It's nice for a T to be here. I think I'll return to my opening because I didn't do that as quickly as I might have liked. And begin with what I feel as a resident of Glastonbury, which is a tremendous debt of gratitude. A debt of gratitude to my neighbors, to all of the volunteers who've served in town government before me, to our teachers, the many residents who are teachers, administrators involved in our schools in one way or another, the many volunteers who make our town beautiful and who've preserved our open spaces. And I want to say my biggest goal in running for office is to be a part of this. Really to give back and to plan for the future. Because a town like Glastonbury doesn't happen by accident. It is the product of generations of hard work. And I think on town council looking forward, we have 2 issues that our council will need to be most focused on to protect the future of Glastonbury. I believe that those are issues of planning and zoning. People have talked about land acquisition. Another way to control overdevelopment in town and prevent it is through zoning. And I think our town council has started to look at recently with things like 4-story zoning and recommendations, is working with town plan and zoning to plan for the future. But we need to be more dense probably in our already developed areas, our centers, so we can preserve open space and preserve the quality of life, the character and feel of our town. And then obviously education. I'm a mother of 4 students, and so many people come to this town for the schools, and we must preserve our education system. And to do that, I think, as I said earlier, we need our various elected bodies to work together.
So thanks again to Talk and all of you, the moderators, for what's been, I think, a great conversation. I was adding this up the other day, and over the last few years, I've been involved in various campaigns and all that, and I've knocked on over 7,000 doors in town over the last few years. And one common theme kind of runs throughout so many of those conversations, which is regardless of where you're at in life, you want Glastonbury to be a town that works for you. Whether you're a millennial looking to buy your first home and lay down roots, whether you're a parent of students who want to have the best possible education for your kid, whether you're a retiree who's seen your kids go through the school system but want to stay in the town that you've called home for the last 30 years. Or if you're a small business owner who wants to make sure that Glastonbury is a place where you can set up your business. The town, you want the town to work for you. That's why I'm running for office, because the town has worked for Ellen and I to date, and you know, when I hear folks say that they feel like the town is not working for them, that's a problem that needs to be fixed. So I'm running to fix that. Also, a promise I can make to all of you is that if I'm lucky enough to get elected, I will be one of the biggest cheerleaders for Glastonbury, both internally in town, and also externally to other towns, to other community leaders, to state government, federal government officials, whatever. I will cheerlead for Glastonbury because I love it here, and I'm sticking around forever. And so that's what I'll do. It's really humbling running for office and kind of putting yourself out there. But I'd be honored if I could have your support on November 5th. Thanks, guys.
I also would like to thank you all for coming out. It's been an honor to serve the town. I've enjoyed it. It's actually very intellectually stimulating. I would just say I would certainly appreciate if you come out and vote on November 5th. I would appreciate your support, and particularly if you think the way we've been running it in Glastonbury for the past 10 years is the appropriate way to be running the town. Thank you.
And I'll add my thanks to Talk for hosting this, for everybody taking the time to come this evening and get to know all of us a little bit better. As I talked about in my opening, one of my experiences in the Navy, I was a budget officer and the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. Since I retired from the Navy, I've worked in the financial services industry, and that's why I ran 2 years ago. Is to bring that experience, that budgetary finance. You probably picked up on that if you didn't know that before that about me tonight, and how I answer some of the questions is how I think. And I think it's important. That's one of the, it's not the only skill set, but it's certainly an important skill set that we need on the town council. And again, it's why I've chosen to run again and hope for your support to add that. One of the people who work for me in the Pentagon, I've always liked to say, because I think it gets at the heart of how you have to think about a budget. His name was Scott. He said, we can afford anything, we just can't afford everything. And I think that sums up how you have to think about the budget. As we go on, I want to say a couple things. One, something I say to people, and I think it's a theme you've heard from a couple folks tonight. This may get me ostracized by somebody, who knows. But, I tell people, at the end of the day, November 6th, I know everybody up here, we're going to have 9 quality people in the town council, and I mean that genuinely. Now, I obviously have a bias as to what I hope 5 or 6 of them are, because, as you've heard, and we've had experience, I think we have to bring a good balance as a slate to this election. Folks that have just moved here who want to make this a home, children in the school system, people who have raised their children here, people like myself who moved here. I've got a senior in high school in that demographic. So with that, we hope for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I did write down a couple notes for this, so I don't ramble on too much and hopefully come in under my time. One thing I did leave out of my opening statement is I've been in town for 25 years. I just celebrated my 25th anniversary with my wife, and we have 2 kids in the schools. So thank you to Talk, our moderators, and everybody who made this possible tonight. And thank you to all of you coming out here to listen to us tonight. Listening is important. 2 years ago, when the Democrats took control over the majority on the council, the first time in 14 years, our counterparts came to visit us after the election to congratulate us. The first person to talk to me was Dr. Beckett. And the first thing I said to him, I remember very clearly, is we want to work with you, not against you. Over the past 2 years, we fulfilled that promise. And in the course of those 2 years, I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, we've had all of 2 votes that have been along partisan lines. We try and work with everyone on this council. Everybody here is a good person. They all love our town. And so we try and make sure that we're representing everyone and hearing everyone's opinions. So we listen. Chairman Galata has told us to vote our conscience every time we go out there. So we don't always even agree with each other within our caucus, but we try to do what's best for Glastonbury. So what I want to do is I want to continue what we started. We've delivered 2 of the lowest 3 mill rate increases in over a decade. We've worked civilly with our Board of Education without giving them an open checkbook. We've been socially conscious. We've worked to preserve our open spaces, and we've worked to maintain the character of the town. We have been on Glastonbury, and we have listened. So thank you very much for coming out tonight, and I hope you'll support me and the rest of my caucus on November 5th.
Thank you, Larry. That was great. I'll just say again, I'm Jake McChesney. I didn't know that it was going to go so quickly that last round. It would have been more quick with the draw of my hand. You can email me at jake.lee.mcchesney@gmail.com. And the only reason I'm hesitant to give people my phone number is because it's a 516 Long Island number. It's 516-680-7739. I have said many times on both TPC and Town Council, we can't do our job as elected officials unless we hear from our constituents and the people that we're serving. And I just want to wrap up tonight by saying that's why I do what I do. I really believe in the power of public service and giving back to the community that you love. So I mentioned I have a 7-month-old son. We actually had him on the morning of the final budget vote for Glastonbury. So I was up until 2:30 a.m. that day. I think I got maybe, thankfully, an hour of sleep, and that evening at 7 p.m. I was here for a final vote. I believe very strongly we are people who have volunteered to serve you, and I think that that's a wonderful thing that we can do, and I hope I'll have the pleasure of doing that for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Talk, for having us and for everybody coming out. When I come home from work and I sit at my dinner table with my fiance, I have the same concerns as everybody here and everyone in the room. I'm concerned about the tax rate, concerned about the safety, the environment, my bills, my student loans. I promise you that if I'm given this opportunity to serve Glastonbury, I'll work tirelessly to keep Glastonbury the amazing town it is. I will do whatever it takes to listen to whatever individual, to hear their voice. I think it's always imperative that we remember that those who are the loudest are not always right, nor do they represent the majority. There are people who may just be quieter or not have the capability of coming out in public, but they need to be heard. It's important that our boards, our commissions, they meet and listen to those people because their voice is just as important as those who are the most vocal, who will come up and pound on their chest on the table at any board or meeting. So once again, thank you so much. I would appreciate your support and your vote on November 5th. Thank you so much.
So, I grew up outside of Buffalo, New York. I chose, go Bills. I chose to move to Connecticut. I love it here, and I absolutely love Glastonbury. One thing, I had served on the Zoning Board of Appeals in a different town that I was in, and our chair started every meeting saying, all of us are volunteers, and all of us love this town. So I echo a lot of what Lillian had said. All of us are volunteers here, and I truly believe that everybody loves this town. Volunteering is something that I think makes our town great. We have volunteers. I've seen it across tons of different things, from sports teams to my GREC coaches, where I have over 50 parents who volunteer their time, to Boy Scouts, to the Garden Club, to Talk, and other groups within town. I think we need to make sure that we encourage more and more people to volunteer within this town. It really gives you a sense of ownership within the town. The other thing that I think is really important that we didn't talk a whole lot about was building regulations and open space. Those are two things that are large priorities within the town council, and one way that we can really affect how our town continues to grow. It's a balancing act, so you not only have to look at making sure that we can keep taxes down by bringing in businesses and opening that up to people, but also making sure that we maintain the quality of life within town. I lived in a town where they basically said yes to every business, and it did not end well. And their school system has continued to go down because people, frankly, didn't want to live there anymore. So you really have to balance both of those things so that you have a quality of life, while also making sure that businesses want to come here and to work. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. I'd have to say it's been an interesting 2 years, without question. We stepped into the position, and I was selected to be council chair. And I told folks that I was very, very interested in making sure that we ran a very bipartisan council. And I think I'm very pleased to be able to say that we were able to accomplish that. I ended up saying that we wanted to have more transparency. So I'm very pleased that the Board of Finance meetings are now televised so that people can see what happens within the Board of Finance. I was also extremely interested in making sure that my Republican colleague, Minority Leader Chip Beckett, heard everything I heard at the same time I heard it. And so I invited Chip to join me with every conversation with the town manager, and instructed Richard that if he was going to have a conversation with me, I wanted him to have it with Chip too. I also want to publicly say that it's been an absolute pleasure for the last 2 years to work with Chip. I have found his guidance, I have found his knowledge about this particular community to be deep and to be true. He never played a partisan game with me. And so, for the record, God, I mean that. You know what? You got a decision to make. I agree with everybody. You've got folks up here who are serious about wanting to serve this community and serve it well. I would ask that you return the Democrats to power. I think we've done a good job. We've held your taxes down. We've treated the Board of Education with respect. And we've been bipartisan.
I would ask that you don't. Tom and I go back at least 40 years. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate your participation. I look around the room and I see some people that I knew when I was very little. Bobby DeBella, I've known practically all my life. Brian Hollister, I met when I was in high school. He was working for Parks and Rec Department. And Tom and I were reminiscing earlier here about the town center. Franklin Pharmacy, there was a rotary, not a roundabout, but a rotary. It was just like 3 or 4 signs that had to go around the circle. Where the town green is was a Texaco station. That's the soda machine he was referring to. Triangle Cafe and the post office was where the municipal parking lot is now. My family moved here in 1965. My father was an insurance executive. And when he told his colleagues that he was thinking of moving to Glastonbury, they were like, "You're going east of the river." Everybody was going to Simsbury, Avon, West Hartford. I don't know why they chose Glastonbury, but I thank God every day that they did. I love this town. I grew up in this town, my brother, my sister, nephews. I bleed Glastonbury. I continue to do this work because of issues such as I had a Vietnam veteran combat sergeant call me because he couldn't get the certificate he needed for a tax break for his property. I like to help people with those kinds of issues, especially veterans. This community has given me everything that I have today, and I want to fight for Glastonbury, and I will continue to fight for Glastonbury and stand up for Glastonbury if you choose to send me back to the council. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I do have more notes, but then I was writing furiously in the margin. So I should say that I'm a high school teacher, and so I also wrangle a house full of boys and dogs, so my life is full of noise and chaos and things that I like getting broken. And before I do my little spiel here, I do want to say, Chip made a comment earlier about our budget meetings and people not showing up. You would never ever pay your credit card bill without looking at the line items. You would just say, oh, they're probably right, and pay it online or write your check or what have you. But essentially, when you're not attentive to the town budget, when you're paying your taxes and you're not aware of what those line items are, that's essentially what you're doing. And I would love for more people to show up, and not just so that we're not the only people in the room, but so you know where your money's going. I think people need to be more informed. So we moved to Glastonbury for countless reasons. The green space, the character of the town center, the schools, senior services, and those attributes may have changed since our arrival in town. We do have more development, a a larger population, and diminishing state funding. Our town needs change over time as well. Our kids grow up, they no longer attend schools in town, we become more interested in things like conservation or seek services to support us as we age in place. Ideally, we're creating in Glastonbury a town that can support its citizens, whatever their needs may be. I'd also like to believe that our voters understand that part of being a community means supporting the needs of their neighbors, even when those needs differ from their own. With foresight and thoughtful budgeting, we can position Glastonbury not only to survive, but to thrive whatever climate is ahead. And I know that I've been a voice for positive change and responsible budgeting in the last 2 years. And I'm confident that I can continue to work on behalf of the voters of Glastonbury for an economically stable and socially responsible future. And I too think you should vote for the Democrats. Plus, if you're voting for that guy, I'm his handler, so make sure you get me in there.
I don't know how to count that, but I want to thank all of you for attending tonight. It's been a great audience. It's been a pleasure to be here. Adam and Julie, thank you very much for moderating. I think the Glastonbury Town Council, in my experience, has always been bipartisan, and I think much has been made about a couple of votes that may or may not have been taken because of the issue before us. But my experience has been that virtually 90+% of all our votes since I got on in 2005 have been unanimous. And the ones that were disputed usually had both Republicans and Democrats voting in opposition. So I don't think it's been nearly as partisan as some people would have us believe. I also think that there's a healthy tension between the Board of Finance, the Town Council, and the Board of Education about how to best serve the needs of the town. I don't think that it's appropriate to rubber stamp it, and I think it's important that we ask hard questions because you in your emails and your comments at public hearings do ask hard questions, and I would be pretty embarrassed if I and my colleagues weren't able to say we already asked that question. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. I don't think we need the hyperbole of the national press covering Washington, D.C., moving to Glastonbury and the Glastonbury citizen. I don't think that really helps any of us. I did mention at the beginning that I think Glastonbury has changed a lot. It's continuing to change. The Commission on Aging has a study, and I hope you've all done it, about livability. But I think it really goes to the heart about we're not just a suburban community with new homes, with new families and children. We now cover a full spectrum of ages and demographics. And I think the needs and demands on our town services need to change in reflection of that difference. So I think that that's something that we need to engage all of you in, and I hope you will. And I think it's important that we do ask those tough questions, and you ask the tough questions in the next 3 weeks, and let us know what you're thinking. I appreciate your support and all my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. 15 minutes left. So what did we do with those 15 minutes? Well,
I have to thank everybody.
what did you want to ask the last question?
Oh, I forgot.
That's all right. You can always steal my thunder here. That's okay. We have about 15 minutes, so we left enough time for a pop quiz here. What we're going to be doing is we're going to go down the line here. You have 1 minute or less, but if you could, please comment on one of your opponents, something nice about them. Something that you admire about them, something that you respect. What we'd like to try to do is mix it up. So, if you've heard somebody make a comment about one of your opponents, try to pick a different one so everybody can have a comment about them. And I also apologize, I called you Mr. Beckett. I didn't realize it was Dr. Beckett. So Dr. Beckett, please start.
I did my externship in New Zealand. Everybody was Mr., so that was fun. I actually want to compliment Deb Carroll. She's been a lot of fun to work with. She's an English teacher, very detailed and organized, but she's been a lot of fun. I thought originally a wild-eyed liberal that I just couldn't be in the same room with, and she's been actually wonderful to work with. We get along very well, so thank you, Deb.
Chip, that's so nice, but I'm going to say my nice thing about Kurt. So I have to say that Kurt and I think we've had 2 votes where we agreed with each other on divided issues this year, or the last 2 years. But Kurt is absolutely himself in everything he does, and he is not afraid to voice his opinion. He's not afraid to vote his opinion, and I always know exactly what he's thinking, which I really appreciate. And actually, Chip and Kurt and George and my colleague Larry all showed up at one of my son's basketball games, a bunch of 5th grade boys in the semifinals, when I casually mentioned it, and my son said, "Oh, they're all gonna come, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, maybe they're gonna come." And lo and behold, they did. So it was a nice thing to see. And all the boys on his team, I went down there and said, "Do you know who's sitting up there?" And no, they definitely didn't, but they were very appreciative of having these grown-ups coming and watching their conference.
So, many years ago, 20, 25, maybe even 30 years ago, I was driving down King Street and I ran out of gas. And I only knew one person in the area, and that was the Galatas. And Chris took me over to Manchester to get a can full of gas, and I think Bernie was a little guy, and he said, "Why are you doing this?" And she said, "Because we're friends and we take care of our friends." So I've known the Galatas for a bunch of years, and Tom and I go at it at a council meeting, but we still remain friends.
Ain't it the truth? George, I've got to tell you that when you raise your hand, George has this sort of Peter Falk approach to the council. You know, excuse me. I just got one question, and then I have an hour later after about the 30th question. But you know, underneath that is really a truly decent man. He's a fellow who can appreciate the sense of somebody who occasionally pokes fun at him. And he pokes fun at himself. And I'd also tell you, he's not afraid of poking fun back. But I think he's representative in many cases of the group over the last 2 years. A group of people who can disagree at times, but can also find the good in one another. You can keep going.
Yeah, we should have a time limit on this question. I would like to recognize Actor Beckett. When we came in on the town council, a lot of us were pretty new this last time. Larry, myself, and Deb were all new to the town council, and he was very welcoming. He, I will say, always takes Glastonbury's interest when he's making decisions. I don't see him go on party lines. I think he looks at each issue individually and makes what he feels is the best decision. On top of that, I'd say quite a fixture in the community, being a vet to many of our pets within the community, and I really appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you.
I'd like to give kudos to actually everybody who's up here and running. It's all volunteer, and this is my first time running, and it's a tremendous undertaking, working full time and knocking on doors on the weekend. It takes a lot of energy. It's a lot of miles on your feet. Meet some nice people. Some people slam doors in your face, and that's part of the course. I'm sure my fellow Democratic candidates who are running have experienced that as well. Standing on the side of the road waving, it's a humbling experience when you do it by yourself. It's a little awkward. But I was I gotta be tougher and grow thicker skin the next time I go out there while waiting for my fellow colleagues to come out and help me out. But so, it definitely takes a certain personality. I appreciate all the hard work that they're putting in. I know it's long hours, time away from your family, your loved ones, not being able to watch Sunday football, etc. So, pounding the pavement. So, just kudos to everybody up here. I feel the hard work you're putting in, and best of luck to everybody.
Well, I'll say I thankfully have not experienced slam doors in my face. I did once wave and get a middle finger so far, so kudos to the people of Glastonbury. I think, I want to say two things, but first, I want to echo what Deb said, because I was very impressed by Kurt's ability to stick to his guns on a number of things, and I really do think that on a number of issues, you're going to know where he's going to go on it. And I was actually surprised by one, and it was one that I, after the fact, regretted the way I went on it, and I respected the way that Kurt went on it. So I think that's very respectful, Kurt. And the other point I wanted to make was, again, bringing up Kurt, but this is to all of my fellow Republican councilmen. When I was appointed and I was sitting in the audience, I think it was either the time before, so I was learning what was happening, or it was the actual night I was going to be appointed. Kurt came up to me and shook my hand and welcomed me to council, and every other single Republican member of council has been very welcoming, which makes it a very nice way.
Sorry, I have to keep going. Thank you.
Reclaim your time.
Being follically challenged, I'm going to say something very nice about Wood Osgood. But in all seriousness, we might not always agree, and that's fine. I tell people I don't expect my wife and I to agree 100% of the time, and we don't. Whit's thoughts are well thought out, well reasoned. He expresses them well. And sometimes we disagree, but he truly loves our town, and he is not shy about sharing his opinions with us, so I appreciate that.
I didn't think I was going to like this format, but I find it much better now.
Yes, I'll start with, first I appreciate the question. Again, I alluded to it in my closing, others have as well. Larry did, and I'll kind of target him perhaps in my comment. Like, the nature of this is there is some level of confrontation, I guess, for lack of a better term, but we all get along. And I'm glad, I sometimes say, I wish people could see this right now, like we actually, like Larry and I have gone out to dinner. And so, Larry's a guy I'll say, specifically, I was going to say, I like your hair is actually wet. I guess just one of the first people I got to know, as I came onto the council and campaigning together a little bit last time, really standing at the polls and talking. And I've appreciated specifically, Larry being very vocal meetings and other, you heard it tonight about, one Glastonbury and working together. And so I really appreciate that, Larry.
Matt, this is for you. It appears that it applies to Peter as well. I just want to thank you both for taking the time to do this and the willingness to run for public office. It is important.
Thanks, Whit. I'm glad I get to talk about Lily because that was the first person that came to mind when this question was asked. No, for real. I know we've been on opposite sides of things over the last couple of years, but I respect your conviction so much. And you stick to your guns. And sometimes it bucks members of your own party, and that takes courage and guts. So congrats to that. And also for Phil, I know what it's like being a new guy in town running and putting yourself out there when you don't know a lot of people in town. It's tough. It's really tough. So, I appreciate you stepping up.
And I'm trying to go with the one person who I don't know anyone has specifically singled out yet, so I'm coming for you, Jake. But actually, you were the first person I thought of as well with this question. And it's two compliments I have to give, really. One is to your obvious dedication to your role on the town council and service to town. I know what it's like, some of those long nights on TPZ before you were on town council, and so thank you for that, and time away from sleep and anything else you might be doing with your evenings. But then also, as you shared earlier, the dedication it requires to come out on the day of your child's birth for that budget vote, and that I really respect that. But even more than my respect for you, Jake, is my respect for Claire. my compliment to you
serious answers to all the questions, and to our moderators who came from afar. What? I didn't get there. And to our timekeepers in the corner who are ringing. Okay, and one more thing, please go out and vote on November 5th. And a final note is the words of Tim Naftali, who is a historian and clinical associate professor of public service at NYU. And he said on WNYC radio on September 27th, civic engagement should be a patriotic requirement. Read, get involved, think, participate. And with that, we thank you and we end the